Welcome. This session is for PhD students who are entering this fall 2024, who are international students and will be receiving a stipend. If you are in astronomy, chemistry, physics, psychology, or statistics, you should join us for this afternoon's session. In this morning's session, we're going to give a little introduction to some of the key players that you'll meet here at Columbia. We'll do a brief overview of your PhD funding and how that disbursement process works, what goes to your student account and what goes directly to you. We'll also talk a little bit about your responsibility. As a fully funded student, there are still a few key fees and other costs that you are responsible for paying. And so we want to make you aware of that. We're also going to go over the registration process and enrollment categories. It's something that's a bit more unique to Columbia, but these enrollment categories are the driver of any true registration and recognition of you being a registered student with the university. And so we want to make sure that we highlight that. We'll talk about the timing and next steps and action steps that you can take between now and when you arrive in the fall, and then steps that you'll need to take upon your arrival if you are currently abroad. And then, as I mentioned before, hopefully we'll have a period of Q&A at the end. But as you have questions as we go through the presentation, please feel free to put those in the Q&A, and my colleagues are on standby to assist you in answering those, or if we get to them, they'll be answered in the presentation. So welcome once again. We wanted to sort of introduce you to some of the players that you will work with as you go through your studies here at Columbia. And the first is the DGS, or the Director of Graduate Studies. So each department does have this. This is more of an academic role, but they coordinate with the DAF, which is the Director of Academic Administration and Finance, as well as with the Financial Aid Office and other offices and your academic advisor in terms of coordinating fellowships, teaching and research appointments. However, the DGS, although they're involved in that, your DAF, the Director of Academic Administration and Finance, is really going to be your first stop for information. They work and coordinate with the DGS. In some departments, you also have a business manager who processes payroll funding if you're on an appointment or requests departmental funding, excuse me. And they also can help to coordinate when you receive an external fund. But the DAF is really going to be your first point person if you have questions about your finances. And within the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, GSAS Financial Aid Office, you have a dedicated departmental liaison that works directly with your department, your DAF, to ensure that we coordinate and coordinate both your internal and external funding sources, and that those are in compliance with both GSAS and university funding policies. So I am, for example, one of your departmental liaisons. We've highlighted here where you can find out who your departmental liaison is on this little handy website. Also, in addition to the departmental liaisons, you will receive information outside of your department, outside of financial aid, sometimes on funding opportunities from, for example, Student Affairs or Compass, which is our recruitment and employment team, as well as diversity and inclusion. So just know that some notifications of funding opportunities would come from somewhere other than where you might expect, meaning other than financial aid or within the department directly. But if you do have questions, these are your two, the DAF as well as your financial aid liaison. If you have questions about your funding, are your first point people to take a look at. An overview of the funding that you receive. So you should have received information in your admissions letter that outlines your tuition and fees and living expense information in terms of what you're awarded for this year. These items do change each year, generally increasing for tuition and fees as well as the living expenses. So your tuition and fee funding includes health insurance for both you and your eligible dependents, if that's applicable to your situation. You are automatically enrolled in the university's health insurance when you enroll. Again, we're going to talk about registration in a minute. But once you enroll yourself automatically, you have to actively enroll any dependents that you have. Columbia Health Team has information about the waiver or enrollment information if you're adding dependents available. I believe that process begins July 15th on the Columbia Health website. So you can just Google Columbia University Health Insurance and find the information about the waiver, as well as other information about when you can add qualifying dependents and the process to do that. For those of you who may have external health insurance, for international students, it's unlikely that that insurance would be eligible to exempt you from the university's coverage, but you can apply for a waiver if you have comparable external insurance. International students are required to have, as well as any other students enrolling more than half-time, are required to have comparable insurance if they are not enrolled in the university's plan. Now, you also will receive funds, and for you who are not in the 5 departments I listed earlier, your funds for the first academic year will be in the form of a stipend. The stipends for the academic year are issued in 2 lump sums at the beginning of each semester, and they are subject to tax withholdings unless you have or are from a country that has a tax treaty with the US. So taxes are withheld from this stipend prior to you receiving that. In addition to the academic year stipend, you're also eligible for a summer stipend. You have 6 years of guaranteed funding for the academic year and 5 funded summers, beginning with the summer following your first year. So summer 2025 would be the first summer stipend. That is also subject to tax withholdings. For the academic year stipend, it's divided because the semesters are slightly uneven. The 9-month semester means that you would get 4 ninths of the semester of the total academic year stipend for the fall and 5 ninths for the spring. And again, these stipends are dispersed for the academic year. They're dispersed in the fall, sometime in mid-September. We're going to take a look at that timeline in a little bit. And then for the spring, they're dispersed typically in mid to late January. Summer stipends are dispersed sometime around mid-May, depending on the summer stipend processing schedule for the year. And there's some more information about the detail of your fellowship breakdown, as well as some more information about taxes available. Now, we do get a lot of questions about taxes. Our office, along with any other office here at Columbia, will be prohibited from providing you with specific tax advice due to the libelous nature of tax advice. But we do offer a tax information session in the spring, typically in late February, early March, that gives you some information about filing taxes in the US, as well as the Office of International Students and Scholars has other tax information available on their website that we encourage you to explore. However, as I mentioned, no one here at the university will give you any specific advice. However, we do have that opportunity to get information from an external resource, and that'll be announced. That workshop will be announced sometime again in February or March. Here's another little helpful link if you need to understand a bit more about the overview of funding, depending on your department. This sort of just breaks down what that funding is for the year, depending on whether you have a 9-month year or a 12-month year. And in addition to the tuition and fees that are covered, as well as the living expense, there are other resources that you will need to opt into. For example, you are guaranteed housing for 5 academic years. You should, if you were not already, certainly be in touch with Columbia Housing to progress through that progress. As I mentioned before, including yourself and dependents in health insurance is also something that GSAS is going to cover. If in the event that you needed to take a medical leave of absence, you would also continue to have health coverage during the first semester of that leave. There are optional dental plans as well as vision plans. The dental plan, there is a small subsidy for that. The vision plan is not subsidized, but something that you may voluntarily opt into. And for those of you who have families and have children or expecting a child during the time that you're in the program, there are accommodations for parental leave, as well as other childcare subsidies that you can opt into, and those are managed through offices other than financial aid. So take a look at these links. Again, the session will be available on our website in the new student checklist within a week or so. So you'll have access to link to all of these places that we're sharing with you now. Also, something to explore as you continue through the program is funding for conferences, as well as our international travel awards, which can help to offset some of the costs that you may have associated with those travel opportunities. We also provide you with additional printing quota upgrades when you're not on appointment, and in semesters, for example, when you're on your dissertation fellowship. So you'll have access to the gym for all of your funded years. So again, lots of other resources that are not outlined explicitly in your admissions letter, but we wanted to provide you with some helpful links on where those might be. And the other thing is that there are other scholarship opportunities, for example, through interschool fellowship, which is university-wide fellowship opportunities through the business school, through SEPA. So other schools may have funding opportunities that you want to explore. The Graduate School of Arts and Sciences does send you a newsletter. I think it's bi-weekly, so you'll see information about different opportunities in that. Just be mindful that some of the information about funding and resources will come from maybe offices that you wouldn't expect. It doesn't all come from financial aid. Now, although you're a fully funded student, you do have a responsibility for certain things. And the one that's most overlooked is rent. So while you're receiving a stipend for your living expenses and you receive subsidized housing from Columbia Housing, you must actively make payment of your rent. Your rent will be billed to your student account each month, and you're responsible for using the stipend funds that you receive to make payment back to that housing as it's assessed. So make sure that you are on top of that. You'll receive a monthly billing statement from Student Financial Services. All tuition and fee billing, including housing, is done through a central university office, Student Financial Services. So that notification of tuition billing, please, although you're fully funded, pay attention to that, because you may have fees that you're responsible for making in addition to rent. Each semester, you're charged a student activities fee of $46. This goes to the Arts and Sciences Graduate Student Council, so basically your student government and any opportunities that they present for you throughout the year. You're also assessed in your first semester a one-time fee of $105 for access to transcripts for life. So note that in your first semester, you will have that. Again, the stipends these fees are not deducted from the stipend that you receive, and so you'll have to actively go back and make payment. Should you enroll in any language courses or other courses which have specific fees associated with them, you are also responsible for those. So for example, many of the language courses have a $15 fee for language lab. That would be your responsibility and would be something that you would see billed in your student account that you could make payment of on the semester in which you're being charged. In the event that you miss registration or make a late payment, there are also fees associated with that, as well as if you withdraw. Now, if you carry a balance of over $1,000, you will have a hold placed on your account. That hold will prevent you from registering for future semesters. So be mindful again of falling behind on your rent in particular, or not paying some of these fees, which, although small each semester, can add up and then put you in the position where you have a balance that you're not able to reduce. Failure to register for the subsequent semesters means that your funding cannot disperse. Aid is based on your registration as a student. So no financial aid, stipends, tuition and fee is going to disperse unless you are a registered student. So let's talk about that for a second. Registration is a little bit different here. In addition to registering for any courses that you may choose to be taking in a semester, you will also be required every single semester to enroll in an enrollment category. So the first 6 semesters of your enrollment, you're going to register for the full residence unit. The residence unit registration, this course, and we're going to give you the course number and the dates of registration in a minute. But this course, adding this to your registration when you sign up for classes in late August, is what recognizes you as a registered student. So you could register for classes, but if you don't have the RU added to your account, this enrollment category, it doesn't appear that you're registered at all. No tuition is assessed. You would not have access to health insurance because, again, you're not a registered student without the enrollment category every semester. So your first 6 semesters, you're registering for the RU. We're going to give you that call number for that course, but it's a 0 credit course that you are going to add to your schedule each semester that you're enrolled for these first 6 semesters. As you progress through the program, it may be a different enrollment category that you'll register for. We'll send reminders and little notifications to let you know, but be aware that you're not registering just for courses, and more importantly, you're registering for this enrollment category each semester. And what can you be doing now? Or rather, what can you do as soon as possible? So for those of you who are abroad, once you arrive in the United States, we encourage you to begin the process for applying for a Social Security number. The ISSO, the Office of International Students and Scholars, has some very helpful information on how to apply, almost like a step-by-step to take you through that process. So take a look at that as soon as possible so that you understand what the process is going to be. If you're already here, you can certainly start any of these processes right away if you're already here in the States. Additionally, as soon as possible, we encourage you to open a U.S. bank account. There are some resources. Again, I know we had one question about, is there a preferred banking institution? There is some information about applying or opening a bank account here in the U.S. and recommendations. I believe that ISSO does indicate a few different banks that are in the Columbia area, but any banking institution in nearby campus would work. There are lots of banks near the Columbia campus. So after applying for a Social Security number, you don't need the Social Security number to open the bank account, but I, again, encourage you to begin that process because it does take a little bit of time. Open the U.S. bank account as soon as you're here. If you were previously a university student and have any outstanding holds or balances on your account, you need to make sure that you're taking care of that as soon as possible as well, because that will prevent you from being able to register in the fall, which again is going to prevent any of the funding from dispersing. The other hold that prevents registration and prevents funds from dispersing is the immunization hold. If you have not taken a look at the immunization compliance requirements, we strongly encourage you to do that as well as soon as possible. You can do that from abroad. And the reason that we encourage you to do that is the sooner or the closer you get to the start of the semester, the more likely it is that there will be a backlog of this immunization compliance in the compliance office, and it can take up to 2 weeks for them to process. So the sooner you get these pieces cleared, the better off you'll be in terms of receiving your fall funding as soon as possible. You'll also go through a process to provide visa information to the payroll team. Your stipend will go, we're going to take a look at what the process flow is, but it will eventually go through the payroll system in order to do the tax withholdings. And the payroll team will need specific information from you about your visa, and there's an online process that you'll go through. Our office will reach out with you about that next month. So additional details forthcoming, but just know that there is a process that's going to happen that we're going to be alerting you to. And what else could you be doing? Now, these we're encouraging you again to complete if possible by August 23rd. If you have not arrived on campus by that time, then as soon as possible after your arrival. In some cases, you may be able to do these items also from abroad as soon as you have your U.S. bank account and as soon as you have what your U.S. local address will be. Now, as an international student, if you will remain on a visa, then you need to have a US address on file for your local address. So that should be your New York address as your local address, or wherever you are staying in the New York metropolitan area. So if you're in Connecticut, then it would be your Connecticut address, but it should be your local US address here in New York. In addition, your permanent address should remain as a foreign address. So even after you have been here for a couple of years, if you are still being processed as a visa and your citizenship status has not changed, then you should have a foreign address listed as your permanent address. I think for some students after they're here, their permanent address they feel should be their US address because they've been here for a few years. But for purposes of the visa processing and payroll processing, that foreign permanent address needs to remain as a foreign address. So don't change that unless you have a citizenship change. So if you are in the process to become a permanent resident, please reach out to your dedicated financial aid liaison so that they can ensure that they coordinate with the stipend and payroll teams to make sure that you are taxed appropriately or exempt from taxes if appropriate. If you have a change in your citizenship status at some later point during the year or during your program, again, reach out to your financial aid liaison so that they can help coordinate that with the payroll team and get you connected with the right person to make those appropriate updates so that you have the correct taxation applied. So you can go into SSOL if you have your uni set up in order to update those addresses. And again, as soon as you have a US local address that you're aware of, I would encourage you to go ahead and do that. We also do some outreach in July to sort of align the address updates and make sure that folks are getting them updated so that that's not the reason that disbursements are prevented, but know that funding cannot disperse if you do not have a US address as the local address and a foreign address as the permanent address. And then again, once you have a US bank account set up, we strongly encourage you to enroll in direct deposit. Right now, we would recommend that you go to this SFS website to enroll in direct deposit. Over the course of the next month, there could be changes to that process, and we'll alert you to any change in terms of where you may need to input that direct deposit should the process change during the summer. But for now, follow these steps, get that bank account set up, and once it is, enroll in direct deposit. And we encourage, again, all of these items to the greatest extent possible to be completed by August 23rd. And that's because the following week is the first opportunity that you will have to register. And it is a 3-day window of registration in order to receive your funds at the earliest possible disbursement in mid-September. So between August 27th and Tuesday, August 27th and Thursday, August 29th, you will see a registration appointment available to you in SSOL. These appointments are timed, and so it's not just the whole 24-hour period. It's usually something like 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. or some specific window during the day. And the reason that that's broken up and that there are limited windows is because this registration system is used for the entirety of the university. And so as not to overwhelm the system, schools are given certain populations registration windows at different periods throughout the summer. So for you as a new entering student for fall of 2024 at GSAS, this is your 3-day window. Registration, if you miss this 3-day window, will reopen in September, but it will also mean that there is a delay in your funding. And that's, again, because nothing happens until you have registration. You're not an active student and no funds can be dispersed to you. You don't have tuition assessed. You don't have health insurance until registration happens. And as I mentioned before, here is that call number. Here's the registration number and the call number that you have to sign up for that course this fall when registration opens for you during that next window. And I'm in a little bit of a freeze. We're going to go, the next slide is going to show you the information about the actual disbursement process. And the first thing that happens in the disbursement process is that we in financial aid, here we go, will add your funding to the financial aid system. So there are a series of systems that the university's funds will go through, but the first funding is added to the financial aid system for your tuition and fees, as well as your stipend. If you have a local address on file and your direct deposit is in place and you have no holds and you register successfully, then the funds should begin to move through this process. Now, we did highlight that you should have your social security number set up. If you don't have your social security number set up at that time, the funds will disperse. But again, we are advocating for you to have that social security number set up as quickly as possible. Once the funds are applied to financial aid and you're registered for the enrollment category of RU, those funds will move to the university student account. Your tuition and fees, including health insurance, would then be covered. If you have added a dependent, know that our office doesn't receive notification of those. And so if you see that your health insurance charge is higher than the funding that we've provided, we do a reconciliation to see who has added dependents. So you can certainly reach out to your liaison or just wait a bit and you'll see that we're updating those funds as the semester progresses. Then your stipend funds are transferred to the payroll system for the tax determination. And at that point, your visa information needs to be in place with the tax team in order for the funds to continue through the process. Once they do, payroll processing occurs on a semi-monthly basis, roughly every 2 weeks or twice a month. And if you're enrolled in direct deposit, then typically 3 to 5 days, business days from the date of payroll processing, you would receive your funds. So there's a bit of a lag, both in the payroll process as well as the direct deposit. September 13th is the first payroll process date for fall. And so if you have completed all of these steps, then you would likely receive your funds the following week in terms of the first opportunity for receiving funds. So as you are coming to Columbia, make sure that you have budgeted some funding for your arrival to cover that first month until your stipend funds are processed and arrive to you via direct deposit in your personal account. Then what is the number one reason that these things all get held up? Well, first there is the immunization hold, but the bigger and most frequent item preventing funds from dispersing is that a student has not enrolled in an appropriate enrollment category. So again, we're sort of stressing that because it's unusual, but certainly something that we want you to be very mindful of as you continue through the program, that should be the first thing you add to your schedule every semester. We're recommending that, again, you can take action now if you have some of these items already available. If you're already here in the States, you can open your bank account, certainly clear that immunization hold or any other holds that you may have on your account, update your address and enroll in direct deposit as soon as you do have access to that U.S. account and U.S. Address. And then remember to register for that RU during the August 27th through the 29th enrollment period. And you should also register for at least one course. It's a little less imperative, but you should be registering for the RU in at least one course during that. And we're here. There are people here who are dedicated to helping you navigate through the remaining steps of this process while you come to join us this fall. And so again, don't hesitate to reach out to your departmental staff, to reach out to your financial aid liaison, and coordinate with those two individuals to get through the remaining steps of this process if there's any confusion or concern as you go through. And now we're going to open it up a little bit to the Q&A. So I'm going to stop my screen share and take a look here at what we've got for some of these sessions or questions. Okay, can you please explain a little bit more about the coverage for internet fees? Is there internet in all the Columbia housing buildings? Yes, that's correct. So you saw on that list of additional resources that internet coverage was provided. If you're in university housing, then your university housing will also provide you with internet access. From what date will health insurance begin? If we arrive in the US in late August, should we arrange for a temporary form of insurance? So once you're registered, your health insurance is actually effective from August 15th of 2024. For the fall semester, that runs through December 31st. You're then reassessed health insurance in the spring semester, which covers you through August 14th of 2025. So the spring health insurance covers spring and summer, the fall covers the fall, but it is annual year-round health insurance. Again, your health insurance doesn't start until you have registration, but it would, begin retroactively to the 15th once you have registration in that last little 3-day window. What are the banks that Columbia suggests for international students to use? Again, I believe that the ISSO does have some recommended banks listed on their site. We don't specifically recommend any banks, but you can take a look at that and see. Again, most of those will be very similar. I'm wondering whether there will be a move-in stipend because I'm struggling with the moving cost to New York. So while some departments may be offering a moving or relocation stipend, those stipends, just like any other funding, would be as a reimbursement because we cannot disperse anything to you as a student until you're actually a student, which happens after registration. So although there may be a moving or relocation fund that's being given to you or funding that's being provided by your department, it won't be processed until after you have registered. Could you please explain the printing quota upgrade? So again, for all Columbia students, there's an amount of printing that you're eligible to receive as a registered student, but there are caps on how much you can print. You can just opt in to upgrade for printing that gets added to your student account, and then we add funding to cover that. It's a $35 charge. So if you add the upgrade for printing and you don't see again that charge is there, we don't receive notification that students have upgraded, but we do periodic reconciliation to see if students have those charges on their accounts to provide that requisite $35 matching fee. And will this stipend come as a lump sum for the fall semester and mid-semester, or will it come bi-weekly starting from mid-semester? So for stipends, it's 2 lump sums. It's 1 lump sum in mid-September for the fall amount, which will represent 4/9 of the total stipend. I believe that's $15,712 gross. So taxes would be deducted from that amount. And then again, a lump sum in the spring for the spring amount. So 2 payments for a stipend when you're on stipend. In future years, when you are appointed as teaching, then you are paid by a salary, or if you're a graduate research assistant, then you're paid as salary rather than a stipend. In future semesters, when you are, for example, on your dissertation fellowship, then you would be paid by a stipend again. So the way that you're paid is whether you're a stipend and then it's in the form of lump sum payments. If you are paid by salary, it's typically when you're on appointment, and then it is that semi-monthly payment. As an international student, while it's a lump sum, it does come along with on the schedule of that payroll schedule, just because it goes through, but it's only 1 payment, so it won't be multiple semi-month. So I got my bachelor's at a U.S. institution, meaning that I've satisfied the immunization requirements at my previous institution. Do I need to resubmit those documents to Columbia? Absolutely, 100%. Columbia has to have that information. And the easiest way for you, if you did attend a school in the U.S. for your undergrad or for a prior master's program, is to request that information from the school because they already have it compiled. But each institution is required to have that record on file. There's not a universal processing for that. So definitely reach out, get that information, and get that submitted to the Columbia Health Compliance team so that they can move forward on getting you cleared for the immunization. And it looks like we've gotten most of these questions. Here's another one. To what extent, if any, can we have employment outside of our normal PhD duties? For example, being a contractor or advisor on a project. So there are opportunities for you to work and supplement the funding that you're receiving as an international student. You still are eligible to, for example, work as a graduate research assistant within the department, or a grader or a reader to supplement the funding that you're receiving either while on appointment or in the form of a stipend. There are limitations, however. So work directly with your department to understand what amount you can, in terms of time, what amount you're allowed to commit outside of your studies, because your commitment right now is to a full-time PhD program. So the expectation is that you're really doing that full-time, but we understand that some students also want to supplement that income with other opportunities that they might have. So just be mindful, check in with your department, but I believe it's 10 hours per week or per week outside of your regular duties. And that, again, depends on the type of appointment that you hold. Whether you're in your first year, there's a recommendation that you're not working outside of that. But again, work directly with your DAF and your DGS to understand that. They would also then coordinate with our office if they had follow-up questions. I'm going to take one more look for other questions. I think that's pretty much it, right? So thank you again for joining us. As I mentioned before, the session is recorded, so we're going to post that on our website along with the presentation. And hopefully, you know, if you have any questions, you feel free to reach out to us. We're looking forward to welcoming you this fall. Take action on those steps that we've outlined right now and be in touch should questions arise. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.